Alrighty, welcome back everyone. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and you didn't eat too much turkey, especially if it was deep fried. The topic this evening, we're actually part 2 of a series on character traits, looking at the Jewish sources, of which there are many, into character traits. And the character trait we work on this evening is that of anger. And the story is told of a photojournalist who's working for National Geographic. And he hears about a small village in Tibet where the people are living to a very, very old age. And he decides to go and find out what the secret to their longevity is. Flies out, finds his way through the harsh terrain, comes to a village where a lot of old people walking around. Approaches one of them, says, "Can I speak to the oldest people?" He says, "You got to go to the old age home." He's like, "Wow, they must be really old over there." There's a small hut at the edge of town, and there's 3 guys sitting outside the hut. One of them looks like he's from the First World War. The second one looks as old as though he's from the Revolutionary War. And the other one, actually the Civil War, I should say. And the last one looks like he's from the Revolutionary War. I mean, 3 really old guys. So he approaches the first guy, the one who looks like he's from the First World War, and says, "What's your secret?" He says, "I eat a little bit of goat meat, drink a little bit of yak's milk. I never, ever lose my temper. I am calm, I meditate, and I have a long life." That's amazing. "How old are you?" "I'm 120 years old." He approaches the next guy, even older looking, and he says to him, "What's your secret?" He says, "Always calm, never an excess word, meditation, plenty of exercise, and love for all people." He says, "How old are you?" He goes, "I'm 138. So he approaches the oldest of the looking of the 3 guys, and he says, "What's your secret?" And he says, "There's no secret. I ate what I want. I drank what I want. I lose my temper regularly. I used to shout and scream. There wasn't a physical pleasure I didn't enjoy in this world." "Now that's really interesting. And how old are you?" Because I'm 34. Thank you. Okay, we're going to be looking at the health benefits and the social benefits and the psychological and, of course, with Rabbi Lawrence, the spiritual benefits of working on this thing called anger. So I call this "You Make Me So Mad," controlling anger, because this is an expression I heard when I came to America, or I used to hear in American movies, which, you know, we grew up in Europe. And it's an American thing, right? "You make me so mad." Right? Now, I grew up with Mad magazine, so I was like, "Oh, I do, you know. I make it like Alfred E. Newman. I never understood it. You make me so mad." So growing up, when I used to hear that, when I came here, I used to hear people saying it. I never really understood it because people say that to me and be like, "When did I make you so mad? You make yourself mad. What are you blaming me for? I said something, I did something, but you're the one who's deciding to get angry over it." So what does Judaism have to say about this thing called anger? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Are there times when yes, no? How do we understand it? And there are many, many sources. I've just selected a few of them, of which we have quite a few pages over here. And we'll start with the Talmud in the tract called Pesachim, which talks about all the laws of Pesach, and says any person who becomes enraged, if that person is wise, they lose their wisdom. And if that person is a prophet, they lose their prophecy. Now, prophecy we don't really have nowadays. As I've said before many times, the Jewish people are no longer a prophet organization. But historically we were. And in order for a prophet to have prophecy, the first thing they needed to do was to feel good and happy. And we'll do a whole class just on happiness and Judaism on that a little bit later. But, say the sources, if they would get angry and they would agitate, irritate, there's plenty of seats over here, guys and girls. Come forward, don't be shy. That's my junk. Seat. We have some spare sheets over here for you even. There you go. That if that prophet, who's considered to be a very high spiritual level, that's actually the Rambam, Maimonides says that prophecy is like intellectual pursuits. A person can grow in their ability to become a prophet. Right? It wasn't a bit. There used to be schools in Jewish life of prophecy. People actually go and study how to do this thing called prophecy. That's not for now. However, one thing a prophet or any spiritual person, there being the apex of spirituality, would have to do is to control this one midah, we spoke of that word, that one character trait. Says the Rambam, who speaks about this in length, a very, very famous statement of his in the Laws of Conduct. Says Maimonides, the Rambam, those who frequently become angry have no quality of life. Therefore, the sages instruct us to distance ourselves from anger to the farthest degree until a person acts as though he does not even sense those things that would justifiably anger a person. And he says there are certain traits that one must distance oneself from in the extreme, and in fact, it is forbidden to take the standard approach, I'll explain what he means by this in a moment, of the middle path regarding those traits. Now, it goes like this. The Rambam has a whole explanation of this elsewhere, and we're going to relate this discussion of anger. He says that in life we have various character traits. We want to be kind, we want to give charity, we want to help others. He says that a person has to find what he calls the golden mean, the middle road. We Jews are not extremists. If you want to give charity, you're not allowed to give everything away. But then you shouldn't give nothing away. You shouldn't be too happy all the time. Then again, you shouldn't be sad all the time either. You've got to find the middle path. And that, we're going to see, is the golden mean he speaks about. Always finding the middle path, balancing yourself between the far right and the far left, trying to take the middle path through life. We don't like extremists in Judaism. Having said that, when it comes to anger, he dispels that. And one other trait we're going to come to a little bit later on, if you remind me, where he says the middle path is not okay. If a person has the trait to become angry, we're going to see that everyone has a trait to become angry. And it's something we all need to work on. You've got to kind of bend the tree the other way. Just like a sapling, if it bends one way and you want to straighten it, what do? You have to bend it in the complete opposite direction, hoping that it will end up straight up. So too, the rabbis say, and the Rambam is the key person in this, a person has to completely bend themselves the other way. He says it's an extremely negative character trait, worse than all the others, he says. And it is fitting for a person to distance themselves to the opposite extreme, never to become angry, even regarding things for which anger might be justified. Now we're going to see there are times when justifiably a person can become angry. And we're actually even going to see that if we have this trait, I mean, here's the big question. If this thing is so bad, why did God give it to us? Why in our selection, our smorgasbord of character traits, do we have a thing called anger? Why is it there at all? It must have some positive output. Are you with me? Why would it be? Yes, it does say that God gets angry, absolutely. Absolutely. In other words, God has no anger, but from our vantage point, there is idea of anger in God. So there must be a positive application of anger. We're going to see that it is an educational tool that we can use with other people and with children. There's certain times we're going to see where anger is a tool. However, when it's talking about anger as an educational tool, working with children, for example, it has to be pure exterior, inside, calm and tranquil. I'll give you an example just so you understand. Here's one time where anger is justifiable, or at least to display it. You have a 2-year-old who starts to walk, right? Kids, 2-year-old are walking around, and the 2-year-old runs into the street. So how do you react to that? Well, you have two options. One option would be approach a 2-year-old and say, no, 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 naughty, naughty, we don't do that. Because you go to the street, a big truck comes and make road pizza out of you. No, don't do that. Would a child be doing that again? Absolutely. What do you say? No, no, naughty, naughty, don't do that. Patchy, patchy, right? If you do that, you're going to get squished. And you really, and you're like the crying and the snot bubble, right? That is it. Now, inside, you're meant to be calm. But you're using this midah, there's going to be other applications, as an educational tool. In that case, it's a life-saving educational tool in that circumstance, okay? So there are going to be a positive, but for the most part, very, very few. You're going to have to work on this one trait, and it is a tough one. By the way, whenever I give this class, the next day, I always find myself losing my temper. So my advice is to stay away from me tomorrow. If you see me on the street, don't come up to me, don't talk to me, because I'm tested. Says the Or HaTzadik, a great book, by the way, The Ways of the Righteous. This book actually goes through all character traits and describes them in detail, the laws of them, and stories of great people through history who've had to work and how they worked on the various character traits, okay? He says that anger causes a person to be stubborn. Anyone have that? By the way, you know the only way, I love this, the only way the Jewish people as a nation are described, the only character trait that the Jewish people as a nation are described of in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, is Kashei Oref, which means a stiff-necked people. That's the only way. And if you know the Jewish people, it doesn't get better than that. Right? We're stubborn people. By the way, that's an insult as well as a compliment. It's an insult because as a nation, sometimes, right, you want to bring them back and you want to do the right thing, but they can't budge. The Jews, they just can't budge them to come back to the right. But then sometimes a person's doing the right thing and people try to push us away from doing the right thing, and we're stubborn, we'll stick doggedly to what our national mission is. So that, even that trait of called an akshan, right, which goes back to the time of Abraham even, and Moses and the Jewish people then, that trait has been with us forever. We're very stubborn individuals. However, there is a negative version of that, and that comes in the form of anger. And because of a person's anger, they won't make concessions, okay, and will not admit the truth. And that's going to be a problem as well, especially in interpersonal relationships. People who are angry reinforce their rage, unaware of what they do, and they do many things. If we look back in our lives, you can think of all the crazy things that you have done in anger, and they couldn't calm down. It causes irrationality. Actually, according to Judaism, it causes a complete insanity to enter into your head, which of course leads to disputes and quarrels. Okay? And people don't like angry people. People don't want to hang around with you if you're angry all the time. Once in a while, you should show some passion. We're not saying you should be like a complete, docile individual, walk around like a monk, right, not talking, getting excited. That's not the Jewish view. People should be passionate. They should have alacrity. They should, feel, have opinions. Okay, we know Jews have lots of opinions, but they should feel something. However, once it moves to the world of anger, as we're going to see, it's not good. Now, the Talmud says a very famous statement. It says that anger is the inner teacher, which is actually the name of a pretty good book by an author called Zelig Pliskin called Anger, the Inner Teacher. And it's a statement that comes from the Talmud. Why would anger be called the inner teacher? Why that expression? It doesn't say jealousy, the inner teacher. I mean, it could do. It doesn't say love, the inner teacher. That would be nice. It says that anger is the inner teacher. What's it teaching? Well, number one, there's not many answers to this. I'll give you a couple that I learned from my teachers and thought about over the years. Number one is that it teaches you what's important to you. What you get angry about shows what you're about. In other words, if you get angry because you broke one of your nails, or you get angry because you broke your phone, or you get angry over anything else that I get angry over, especially my nails, when you get angry with that, you're saying that matters to me. I am learning, anger is teaching me what's important to me. So if a person does something to me, and I overreact by getting angry with that individual, I'm basically saying you are less important to me than that thing that has happened to me. You with me? I'm actually projecting myself onto that person. So I'm learning about myself. That's number one. Okay? It teaches us. Well, the others we're going to see, but that's, I think, the basic idea that you know what's important to you by what you get angry over. And some people have that button, and you press it, and you're like, well, where did that come from? Have that experience? You like talking to someone, you'll say something to them, and suddenly, you're like, whoa, where did that come from? I just said that your friend, right, your sister, your mother's, and I suddenly, woo, You have that experience? So it's also going to teach you about someone else and what's important to them. Okay? Everyone has, let me give you an example. You're in an elevator sometimes, and imagine you're in the elevator, and as you walk out, you touch someone's arm with your arm. What happens? And the person says, ow! Oh my God, you really hurt me. I'm like, get a life. I just touched you with my elbow. What's your problem? Now, if you found out that person had sunburn, it's understandable. It's not excusable for them to lose like that with you, but at least it's understandable. Everybody has emotional sunburn. Everyone here, and by the way, when you get married or you start a real heavy-duty relationship, you're living together, like marriage, you'll say something once and an explosion will happen, and you'll learn about your partner something which they've carried with them, maybe from childhood, maybe an experience, maybe something they saw, heard, which suddenly, so you're actually learning from their anger something about their personality, and that's something you shouldn't push too often. As we say, don't push their buttons, okay? Page 2, just turn over. The Talmud says, a very famous statement from the Talmud, if you want to know what somebody is like, you've got to check 3 things. Kiss, kos, kas. Kiss means, no, not, kiss is Hebrew for a pocket, i.e. where the money is stored. How a person spends their money, what they spend their money on, reveals a lot about the person. How they spend it, when they spend it, how much they spend, it's going to reveal to you a lot about an individual, right? As I always say, so I went out with some guy and he didn't pay for anything, or this girl, we went out for dinner and she bought everything on the menu, right? It reveals a lot to you, right, how people treat money. That's kiss. Next is kos, which means cup, and that means when a person is drunk. If you want to know what someone is really all about, now we'll discuss this on Purim, because that's when wine and alcohol is discussed. When the wine goes in, the secrets come out. Some people are always very, very happy, but they get drunk. Everyone has oh my God, right? Or they completely lose, they're trashing the place. So when a person imbibes alcohol, you get to know the person a little bit better. Now, I'm not suggesting that on a date you start to like force the guy or the girl to start drinking too much. That is actually a very bad idea. I'll tell you a quick story, by the way. There was a guy involved with JC many, many years ago when we were on 34th location. And he was dating. And he was telling me about a date. He started dating a girl. And he went 2-3 times. She was a very successful girl in finance. And he said he went to a restaurant with her. So I wasn't planning on telling the story, but it fits in very, very well. And during the date, she starts to drink. On a first date, by the way, you don't drink. You drink orange juice, water, and that's it. Alcohol imbibing is not good on a first date. Neither is garlic recipes, right? But wine and alcohol is not a good idea. So she starts to take 1 glass, 2 glasses, turn to 3, and now she's getting a little bit buzzed. True story, the waitress is a fairly high-end restaurant, he told me. And by the way, you don't need to go to a fancy restaurant on the first date, by the way. Okay? Get a little cup of coffee is fine. But anyway, that's another discussion. We'll describe how to date. I have a whole system of dating as well, which we'll do later on the call. I'm being very serious. I know. Oh, no, you don't need it. The guys need it, right. So you go, so there he is, and the waitress is carrying this, you know, the fancy restaurants, they carry around the wine on the tray, you know what I'm talking about? So this girl, this poor waitress comes up, trips up, something happens, and the wine spills all over this woman's dress. Now, she's already, like, tanked up, you know what I'm saying? She's already, like, pretty buzzed. And he said she went crazy with this waitress. I mean, the girl by the end was crying. This poor waitress. And by the manager came over, apologized, a fancy restaurant, you know, got to use business sense. He offered to pay for the dress to be cleaned. Then by the end of it, he was offered to pay for the dress itself, everything. And then she does that and boom, comes back. All right, and she's like talking to him. And he's just like this. Right, he's like completely crushed this poor waitress. They went out, and she was like, okay, you'll call me again. And he says, yeah, I don't think so. And that was the end of that. He's since married, thank goodness, with a couple of kids at this point, and a good friend of mine. And there's a couple of things. First of all, don't drink on a date, and especially don't get drunk. You have to know yourself. But number 2, you'll notice when people get angry with other people, they usually get angry with people who are, quote unquote, lower down on the totem pole than them, or as they think they are, lower down on the totem pole. You don't get angry, generally speaking, with people who are bigger than you, right? In other words, we're going to see there is a relationship between anger, I want to discuss this later a little bit, and ego, okay? Anger and ego actually are 2 traits that go together. You generally get angry with someone who you consider to be lower down than you, right? The car park attendant, hey, I told you I want my car now. I was here before the guy with the ticket. Okay, he came after me. Why is it coming first? Right? Probably his car was in front of yours, you know. But there's no rationality over here. This person's below me, and I'm going to tell them. And this is the common thing I hear. Well, anger is a natural thing. I'm just letting off steam. Nothing wrong with it. And the answer is there very much is. Spiritually speaking, right, psychologically and emotionally, and the rest of it we'll leave aside for a moment. It's a terrible thing for a soul to get angry. And it's something which we're all dealing with. And in this case, in a teacher, this taught this guy that this girl has deep-seated issues if she's willing to crush this person. I don't think you should speak to her boss that way or someone she considered to be greater than herself. So by the way, on a date, a good thing to see is how some people argue. And I always say, before you get married to someone, this naturally happens, you should try to get into 2 arguments. Right? See what they're like when they're angry. Right? Because a date is like usually fun, having a good time. But to see a person when they're angry, as the Talmud says, is going to reveal a lot about the personality. Now we're going to see, I didn't bring this down, but there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that says there's 4 types of people in the world. I regret not bringing it down, but maybe I'll bring it down for you next week. I'll have the source for you. There's 4 types of people in the world. And you can divide the world into 4 sections. Okay, forget the Chinese, the French, the Russians, the English, Pakistanis, forget that. Let's divide the world into 4 sections. Group number 1 are the people who get angry quickly, but calm down quickly. Group number 2, says Pirkei Avot, are the people who get angry slowly. It takes a lot to get angry, but to calm down is also fairly slow. Then the other group are the people who get angry quickly, but calm down slowly. And the other ones get angry slowly, but calm down quickly. Can you see that? So that's the 4 groups. Which is the best of the 4? What's the best of the 4? So let's start with the word. The worst of the 4 are the people who get angry quickly, but it takes a long time to calm down. And the best of the 4 are the people who get angry slowly. It takes a lot to provoke them, but once they get angry, they're quick to get over it. They can just move on, and not just carry on for hours and days and weeks, and let that person or that incident live in their head rent-free. Live in their head rent-free, that they carry around with them the entire time. You should know that the first person is considered to be a rasha, a bad person, and the 4th one, the person who gets angry slowly, but calms down quickly, is called, I believe, a chassid, a great, great person in Jewish thinking. So my rabbi used to ask, when we learned this Mishnah together, in my yeshiva, they were very, very much into us memorizing these ideas, these Mishnahs, in the original Hebrew. And he would say, well, how come there's no 5th category? What's the 5th category? Person who doesn't get angry. Right? Why is that a 5th one? We got the 4, let's find a 5th one. There must be a group of people out there, and the answer is, there is no such person. Everyone's working at it. You can find yourself in all 4. And the fact that they list all 4 means that you have the ability to shift yourself into one of those 4. There's room for improvement. This is not an academic exercise. We're saying that is not good, and you want to try to get yourself into zone 4, which is, it takes a lot to get you worked up, and once you do lose it, and you calm down very, very quickly. Okay? Says the Talmud, someone who creates an atmosphere of fear in their household due to their angry outbursts is like a murderer. In Judaism, when you get angry with someone, you've killed them. Now, it's not a capital crime, but to some degree, you've killed and you crushed that person. I mean, that restaurant, when she lost it with that girl, to some degree, she killed that individual, okay? And Rashi explains that people will flee from the presence of such people with panic, okay? And it could be that people who try to get away from those individuals end up falling into a pit or end up hurting themselves, just trying to escape from them. So he actually says that like a murderer, it could be that they end up killing that person through their anger. And just so you think that Rashi is not exaggerating, that if you get angry with someone, you're actually killing to some degree, Rashi seems to say it could be a real death. However, if you look around, most murders of seemingly sane people you hear about, and you always hear the same thing. I hear about the guy who loses it, or the guy loses it, and they end up shooting at people, and they always say the same. What do they say? He was such a nice guy. He was always walking his mother and carrying the shopping and taking care of someone, and is always doing so good. I never thought he had the ability to chop up 15 people, cook them, and eat them. We are totally shocked. We didn't see it coming. Or he was such a lovely girl, and we don't understand why she got behind the wheel and suddenly she was like, right? And the whole road rage insanity, and every day in the papers, another case of road rage. Has anyone experienced it before? The road rage thing? And by the way, I mean, I experienced it from the, I'll give you some techniques to get over it, by the way. And when people they cut in, or they ignore you, you know the signal ignore? You try to get into the lane, right? And they're like, I'm not looking at you. You can keep signaling, beep, beep, beep. I'm not looking. I don't see you. I'm going straight. There is no room for you. Because we're acting as a pack mentality. The unity you feel of you and the cars in front of you and behind you, when those people are not allowed in, that is real achdut. That's real unity among people in this world. Not for a good reason. I brought down just one incident. I could have chosen anyone, but this one actually made me laugh. I apologize to say. A driver's education teacher, probably because it's funny because this guy's actually teaching driver's ed, resigned after he was accused, I shouldn't laugh, sorry, of having a student driver chase down a motorist who would cut them off. So basically, he's got the driver's ed guy, and he gets cut off, and he's not behind the wheel. The kid's behind the wheel. He's like, just get that guy. So he's like getting the guy, this kid he's teaching, to go and chase this. The teacher was a 36-year-old called David C., was suspended over it. Earlier, the 23-year-old victim and his lawyer said they hope Mr. C will be able to keep his job. Mr. C taught health, physical education, and science at middle school for 11 years. Such a good guy. Teaches kids, take care of everyone. Right? Mr. M's lawyer said he's a guy who's a very good teacher. He does something that's less than wise. We're very concerned about the school system losing such a good teacher. So what happened? Police say that with two students, when another car cut them off, this guy told the driver to chase the car. When they caught up to it, he got out, punched the guy. Mr. M took off and again told the student to chase him. When Mr. C's car was pulled over speeding, he pulled up to tell the officer what had happened. Police said the student driving the car was not charged. Okay? National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates 1/3 of all fatal car crashes, a third, yeah, in which 41,907 people died last year, could be attributed to road rage, anger in a car, which has been identified as aggressive and violent behavior by some drivers who become enraged by the action of other drivers. Okay. So number one, it could kill you. So it's bad for your body. What I want to show you now, that in Judaism we say that anger is actually bad for your soul. And really the whole concept, and we've said this before, we'll say it again. The Rambam says, I said it last class, but it's worth repeating, so hear me out. The whole idea of being in this world, the whole reason that God takes our souls from the upper spiritual realm and forces it into this world, into a finite physical body, and then gives that body and that soul the mitzvot to do all the spiritual deeds, is that we work on our character traits. That is the end goal. That is the goal line we're meant to be getting at. So if you see a person who's quote-unquote very religious or observant, or so, and they lose their temper regularly, once in a while we all do it, it's a problem. Says the Orach HaSadikim, anger denies a person all good things. For example, a person who's angry does not have compassionate heart towards the poor. Anger prevents a person from having intent when they pray. Right? And he even says the divine presence relates to the prophetic thing we said before, doesn't even rest on someone. Right? God, as it were, sometimes you may feel it, sometimes you don't. But you feel as though, you feel godly, as though like God's in your life. But if a person's angry, it doesn't happen. The prophets used to have music played to make them feel euphoric before that prophecy. If they felt aggravation, and it applies to us as well, aggravation, irritation, they felt anger, they weren't at a spiritual level. An angry person cannot learn or accept constructive criticism, more about that later, because nobody will be willing to reveal their failings. You see, part of being alive is to have friends. And friends aren't just there to say, wow, you look fantastic. Oh, that outfit, those green pants, that pink shirt, the yellow tie, it just worked. You're just so unique. No, friends are actually there to give constructive criticism. You know, maybe the beard with no mustache is out. That's just not in anymore. 70s, maybe. But maybe, and that person gets angry with you. But if that's a good friend, that's what friends are meant to be. Friends are meant to be circumstances where people reveal to you that maybe that's not the wisest thing to do. And if a person's angry, right, you have some friend, whoever you tell them, any form of criticism you tell them, constructive or otherwise, they don't listen, they start losing it. So they're not going to improve because no one's telling them. So their whole spiritual reason of being alive is now removed. Nobody wants to reveal their failings, right, out of fear of their fury. Even if someone will rebuke them, they will not accept the rebuke out of anger. In short, he says the person who habitually gets angry cannot achieve anything positive unless they dispel it from their hearts. Here's a little Kabbalistic piece from the Me'or Anayim. He says that every night your soul ascends. When you sleep, your soul ascends to the spiritual world, and a hand, as it were, capital H, writes down all the transgressions that you did that day. Okay? There's a spiritual accounting that we all have when we go to sleep. Actually, one of the reasons why we do go to sleep. That's a whole Kabbalistic thing for its own time, but anyway, take it as a given. However, if a person became angry on that day, only that sin is written down. And nothing else needs to be recorded, he says. Everything is included in anger because anger leads to all transgressions. Everything else you do comes from anger. Nothing emerges in his hand but anger, it says in the Talmud, and this is what he's referring to. Okay? A person's positive actions are also seen, but the focus, unfortunately, is too much on the shortcomings. I want to just go how far this goes. The Talmud, a very famous Talmudic statement, said a person who gets angry and breaks things and trashes things and throws things, you know, although it's like just letting it out, right? That in Judaism is seen as a terrible, terrible thing, really, really. And to such a degree they even compare that incident to idol worship, okay, to idol worship. Now, we don't have idol worship today, but when a person gets angry, they get close. And there is a similarity to it, right? So why is that? What's the allusion? So it says, there shall not be a foreign god among you. Okay, not allowed to bow down to a foreign god, to alien god, okay? Idol worship. What is that? It says the Yetzer Hara, this is the destructive side within a person, okay? So when that happens, a person is pretty much worshipping something that is outside of themselves, okay? By doing that, that is what they've allowed to happen, okay? So anger itself hurts you physically and hurts you spiritually, but then there's another thing that leads to badness as well. There's a trigger action that happens. And it says, King Solomon, the wisest of all people, says, a man of anger will incite strife, and a man of fury is full of offense. And the Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the commentators, says, anger is a great evil for most people on most occasions, not always. And the sages say that someone who's angry is considered as though he's worshipped idols, we said. Okay? Sages say that anyone who gets angry becomes involved in all types of wrongdoing, transgression. So he understands the idolatry thing as, when you get angry, you start to do things you normally wouldn't do. And it's a slippery slope down to the bottom level, which is idol worship. So normally a person would never get involved in idol worship. Maybe American idol worship, but not idol worship as we understand it. That thing a person would never do. But once you get angry, you find yourself doing bad things. Okay? Now, I'll give you a common example over here. Once a person gets angry, they may start to speak bad about it. We'll do a whole class on that, hopefully, right? Lashon hara, bad speech, usually comes out of anger. When people are angry, they start to speak bad about other people, okay? That's like a natural consequence, right? You know that person did to me, and she is such a beep, and he's such a beep, 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 right? And it all comes out, but anger is the catalyst for that. And another Kabbalist, Rav Yosef Giktilia, says, how do we compare anger? He says to an unlocked doorway before a thief. So what's this idea? Why is an unlocked door before a thief? And he says that people have lights of wisdom inside them, okay? And when they have it, basically we're surrounded with iron bolts into which nothing else can come in. The evil inclination cannot enter us. But once the walls are breached, then everything else is going to come out. All the other junk that's inside us that we manage to keep and control, all the other bad traits, okay? Anger is the key that opens the door to everything else, he says. Okay? However, if he's angry, the evil inclination finds a point of entry and entices him to other things, whether it's to fighting or to murder. They all stem from this first trait of anger. So people usually ask me, okay, Rabbi, so you're telling me that we have to work on this trait called anger. It's something we can improve. It's like a muscle. We can work on it. But hey, I get angry. So I want to share a story with you which will hopefully give us an example of how we are capable of working on this trait. So it happened many years ago, and I was just walking down one of the main streets in London when I was a kid, and I'll never forget this. Two cars started to cut each other up, right? Starting, you know, and hooting each other, honking each other, as you say here, right? Boop, 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 boop. And what happened was, obviously, there was a big crowd of people, right? And this is before, like, phones, so everyone was just, like, staring, you know? So eventually, the small car blocked the big car. And the guy in the small car gets out, and he is angry. I mean, he is fuming, right? The vessels are popping out of his forehead. He opens the trunk of his car and takes out it's a cricket bat, but imagine a baseball bat for you people, right? Out of his car, and he starts to swing it around, right? Towards this other large car that's behind him. And it looks like he's going to completely smash it up. I mean, I was convinced murder is going to happen. If I had my phone on me in those days, this is pre-cell phones, this would have been like #1 on YouTube. Okay, the following thing happened. This large car, I remember what it was a very fancy car, which I remember as tinted windows. I mean, that's how I remember it. Suddenly the doors opened very, very slowly. And out come, what can I only describe as 3 of the largest men I've ever seen. In suits, very smart, put together, and they walk out, and they slowly start to walk towards this guy. And this guy goes from this to and very quickly, the baseball bat went back into the trunk. The hood went down, and he walks over to the guys, and he cleans a bit of lint off the jacket, comes it down, and the guys went up to him. They just touch his face a few times, give him a pinch, another smack, and goes the face, and he very sheepishly, with his tail tucked safely between his legs, goes back into the car, and he drives off. End of incident. And I thought about it subsequently, and I thought, where did the anger go? There it was, burning inside him, ready to redecorate this car that was behind him, that was annoying him on the road. And believe me, had there been a 18-year-old kid or a few like high school kids, whatever, he would have completely mushed them. But instead, out come these three guys, and all of a sudden, anger dissipates. It's overtaken by fear. Once fear gets involved, suddenly we're very able to control our anger. And I say the same thing. People say to me, I can't control it. And the answer is, we are able to if we want to. It's there. If we put enough fear into the scenario, now fear of what? So in this case, it was fear of having his face mashed into that person's shoe, okay? Or that person's knee. So that was his fear. But in relationship, a person can be fearful that maybe they would lose this person from their life. Maybe in a job, a person should have fear that they would lose their job. And then it gets trickier when we said, as I said, you deal with people lower down on the totem pole. Maybe you have fear that you're actually doing a terrible thing. You're hurting someone's life, and it becomes a moral, ethical choice rather than a self-preservation thing. And we humans are above animals in this sense, that we're able to make correct, moral, ethical decisions. And Judaism, this is called bechira, or as it's translated not so well, but well enough, free will. We have the ability to choose. We can decide whether we're going to lose it or control it, bechira. And really, that's the only area of free will that we have, the moral and ethical decisions that we have. And losing it with an individual is seen as, I'll tell you how bad this thing, anger is. I want to just wait. I want to jam it home, because maybe we'll control our tempers once in life, and that will end up being a savior for us. The greatest person in Jewish history, one of the greatest people, is Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moses, as you know, his whole raison d'etre was to help the Jewish people get out of Egypt in order to take them into Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. And that was his mission. That was his life calling. He was all about that. Day and night, trust me, there was nothing more important. Why? We can see, right? We can examine. Because there's certain mitzvot you can only do in Israel. Okay, that's the national traditional homeland of the Jewish people for thousands of years. It's not a recent thing. We've always looked at the land of Israel to be the center of our life. It was everything that we ever wanted. What happens? So there's an incident that the Torah describes to us. And the incident is that Miriam, Moses' older sister, died. Right after that, the Jewish people start to complain for the first time in the desert that they have no water. Which, by the way, the rabbis learn out that since Miriam died, there was no water. Why? She was a water producer? Well, to some degree, she was. They say that in her spiritual merit, the Jewish people had water for those years. She died, there was no water. Jewish people start to complain. Jewish people complaining about food or water, nothing new there, right? So go to any kosher restaurant, and that's the first thing we do. So there is Moses dealing with 3 million Jewish people who probably drove him crazy a number of times. It definitely did happen, to the point of wanting to even kill himself at one point. And he says to God, we need water. So God says to him, you have to speak to the rock. Remember that incident? Speak to the rock. So what does he do? He goes over to the rock, and he takes his staff, and he hits the rock. Remember this thing? And miraculously, we're told, from this one point that he hits, water comes out. And Moses is in big trouble. Terrible, terrible trouble. And he says, why did you hit the rock. I told you to talk to the rock. Now, I'm not a tremendous Torah scholar, but I know enough about Judaism to tell you very clearly there is no sin in hitting a rock. Hitting a friend, hitting an animal, right? Hitting unnecessarily, that is forbidden. But nowhere in our Holy Torah or Jewish writings say, thou shalt not hit a rock. So what exactly is that story all about? So here we have a plethora of commentators trying to work out what exactly happened. And Rashi, Rav Shlomo Yitzchaki, gives his answer. Here he could have made a tremendous miracle happen. People would have seen that even rocks obey God. It would have been a great Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name. There is a commentator called the Abarbanel, Don Isaac Abarbanel. Interesting enough, he lived in Spain in the 1400s, and was actually a leader. He was the financier for King Ferdinand and Isabella. And when the Jewish people were kicked out in the Jewish year 1492, not only did Columbus sail the ocean blue, the Jews were kicked out of Spain, which was the America of its day. And he was actually offered to stay, but he said, I'm not, I'm leaving. He left on the 9th of Av. Why that date is important, we'll do during our holidays course, which will follow this semester. And he says something fascinating. He says, I'll tell you why Moses was so reprimanded, because he lost his temper. What was the punishment? Anybody know the punishment for Moses, for Moshe Rabbeinu, for losing his temper on that one occasion? He wasn't allowed, yeah, you're going to say that? Allowed to go into Israel. Now, one second. Now it's out of control. Well, how could that be? I mean, that was his whole life mission. So he lost his temper once, and he didn't even hit anyone. He hit a rock. What's the big deal? So that's a big question. I mean, there are answers, but sometimes in life, the questions are bigger than the answers. This may be one of those questions. But I would like to share an answer with you. You see, when you reach a position of power, when you reach a position of power, which you all do to some degree, right? Whether it be at work, whether it be with friends, or definitely when you become an adult and have children, and believe me, there will be no greater provoker of anger in your life than your children. They drive you crazy. One of the great commentators who died, I met him just before he died, Rav Victor Miller. He actually says one of the reasons that babies are so cute, because if they weren't, you would kill them. My son, God bless him, right now is in his experimenting stage. He experiments, as I call it to my wife, he's expressing himself, which drives her crazy, because he climbs onto the kitchen table, takes the cream cheese, which you just leave on the table, you just leave it there, picks it up, scoops it out, and right, on the walls, on the chairs, all over the place. Now, your average will be like, oh, that's so good. He's expressing himself. You're like, oh my God, we got guests coming in 2 minutes. This is crazy, right? You just want to strangle. He's like, what are you, crazy? And then he's like, oh, you're so cute. I got to get angry with you. Thank goodness. Because if babies came out as teenagers, which could have been, God could have created it, that out of a woman's womb comes a 13-year-old. And instead of crying for their milk at night, they're like, Mom, 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 I want to eat something, I'm thirsty. It could have been that. That could have happened. That could have been the way God created the world. By the way, what would have happened? You'd be like, get it yourself. But as a baby, you can't. Although as a teenager, you hear the problem? So God created us as babies, he says, and we're able to grow. So this family, it can really build up. So you become a person of authority. It's really tough. Hear me well. Forget relationships. Everyone's looking for a husband and wife that's so good looking, so cute, who understands me, who loves me, right? Who treats me well. Forget that. That's irrelevant, right? Forget that. Everyone gets mad to get fat. That's number one, right? Everything goes south. Just forget it. I don't care how thin they are, even the thinnest woman, I mean, she could be like a postcard from Sidon, right? Even if she's going to get pregnant, right? He puts on first year marriage, he's going to turn into the Goodyear blimp. He's like all over the place, Mr. Mitchell. It's not going to go down, and all that matters, I'm telling you, you got to be attracted, obviously. You can't marry, Dracula, but, although nowadays Dracula's like a cool thing or something, I don't know. But you can't marry like Frankenstein, but still, do they control their temper? Are they cool? Are they calm? That's what counts. Right? Take less good looks and more good personality, right? Which now is actually a bad code word. So, when I set you up with someone, oh, is she good looking? She's got a good personality. Oh, yeah. Right? But you know what? So that should be, we're going to see, is one of the qualifications. So when a person reaches a position of power, at that point, they have the ability, they have to work on this. Why? Because the greater you are, the more consequence to your anger. The greater you are, and believe me, to your children, you are a god. Although it stops at a certain point. And everyone remembers in their life the moment when they realize their parents weren't perfect. Some people, they realize at 5, some at 10, some at 15, but it's a terrifying, devastating thing. You want to keep that image going of yourself as long as possible, right? You know that feeling when you realize your father wasn't perfect? You're like, oh my God. Like, my idol is being melted before my eyes. That's what happened on a national scale when Moses hit that rock. Do you know the expression, the bigger you are, the harder you are, the further you fall? That's what happened, okay? People who are very, very great, they are graded to a much higher level. That's the truth. I mean, even in jobs, just to give you another example, eye surgeon, right? Their job comes down to every millimeter, right? They're graded at that, right? 1 millimeter to the left, 1 to the right, it's all done. I mean, the garbage collector, he can miss an entire street, no one cares, you know, he's got a phone call, right? But the eye surgeon, so the higher you are in life, the more you're graded. Moses was graded to a much higher degree. Parents, teachers, people who have position of authority, this trait is going to be the ability to make or break others, okay? So what's the cure? Is there a cure to this, and what is it? Well, obviously one of the great things we have to work on, which is a tough one. In Hebrew, in English it's called patience. In Hebrew it's called savlanut. Does anyone know the hand gesture in Israel for savlanut? It's a very important hand gesture. In other countries it may be an insult, but in Israel, it's actually this. Anyone seen this expression before? Israeli, right? Sharon, with that? Like, how do they do that to you? You ask an Israeli question, they're like, savlanut, like that. So it's like, take it easy. Okay, and by the way, jokes aside, you should know that the road rage, more Israelis are killed through accidents on the highways in Israel than all the terrorist bombings. Okay? An Israeli gets behind the wheel and all the aggression comes out. I mean, jokes aside, it's a terrible thing. So patience and savlanus is something. The Talmud tells the following story. Story time with Rabbi Lawrence. It's a famous one. And it was told of someone called Hillel. Hillel is considered to be one of the great Jewish leaders. Near a Hanukkah time, we may speak about him. And it happened once that two people were talking to each other, and they basically made a deal. They had a bet. Whoever goes and angers Hillel, because he was someone who never got angry, okay, will receive 400 zuz, which is a vast amount of money. And one of them says, I will go and do it today. So some guys are sitting around out in a bar somewhere. They're like, you know what? Whoever gets Hillel angry, I'll give you 400 zuz. So it was Erev Shabbat. Now, Erev Shabbat, the house is it's flying. You're getting ready for Shabbat, you've got to get things ready, you're showering, the kids are getting ready, you're cooking, you're cleaning. Erev Shabbat's a very, very stressful time. And Hillel was washing his hair, okay? He was having a shower. The man went past the door of Hillel's house and called out, who here is Hillel? Who here is Hillel? Hillel, what does he do? Gets out of the shower, and in those days it wasn't a shower, it was a whole process. Takes a towel, wraps himself up, goes to the door, and he says, what do you want? Because I have a question. He says, okay, what is it? And he says, why are the heads of the Babylonians so round? He basically asks them a stupid question, okay? And he says, that's a good question, that's important, because they have skillful midwives. When they give birth, they're careful not to squeeze their heads too much, okay? And the Talmud then goes into more detail, says they went away, he went back in the shower, and he came back another half hour later, or 10 minutes later, and asked him another ridiculous question. Hillel came out, and very calmly, okay? And he says, I have many questions to ask, but I'm scared you're going to get angry. And Hillel tightened his robe, sat before him and said, ask all the questions you have to ask. And he says, are you Hillel, who is called the leader of Israel? And he said, yes, I am. If that's you, he says, may there not be many like you in Israel. The guy said to him, he lost his temper with him. And he said, why is that? He says, because I've lost 400 zuz because of you. In other words, Hillel was able to, now the question is, what is this story all about? Well, it talks about anger, but it could be that Hillel reached his level of power and prominence in the Jewish world because of this trait, okay? Now, there's someone else called Shammai. Hillel and Shammai are actually two academies, but they're two people, and they say he was the opposite. And it happened that a certain non-Jew came to Shammai and said to him, convert me on condition you teach me the whole Torah standing on one foot, i.e., sum up the whole thing in a couple of seconds, right? Give me the cliff notes. And Hillel and Shammai, they say, pushed him away and said, get out of here, kicked him out. Says, don't belittle my religion that you want me to, cliff notes it. He went to Hillel, who converted him and said to you, what is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. We'll discuss that later in the course. He says, that's the whole Torah. Everything else is commentary. Now go study. If you want the one line, i.e. the 1 foot of Judaism, he says Hillel, so he didn't lose his temper with the guy, and he told him what it's all about. Maybe this is the answer, not to be. He says, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. The very famous expression that's been taken by the other religions and Christianity, but it comes to Judaism. He says, everything else is commentary, i.e. everything else in Judaism can be learned out from that one thing. What you don't like, don't do to others. Sometime later, 3 converts met them up, okay? And they said that Shammai wanted to banish, but Hillel's considered great that he brought people to God by the way he was calm in the way he explained things. And many times people apologize, right, when they ask me, or, like, a rabbi, I want to ask you a question, right? So I have a silly question. So I say, there are no silly questions. There's silly answers, and I've heard plenty of those. They're silly questions. The idea is that if you want people to feel calm as possible, so work on this idea of calmness. Just turn over, we've run out of time, so just give you one more from the Ramban. And the Ramban, there was a custom that people used to write letters to their children before they died. So the Ramban, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, not the Ramban, right? He lived in Spain, and then Israel, and died in Israel. So he wrote a little letter to his children, which has now become a classic. And you can find it, there's a book. It's a short, very short piece, this big, and it was translated. And many people have accustomed to study this every month, or every week, or every day, to just read through this. And he starts off his letter to his children saying, accustom yourself to speak gently to people at all times. Here's how he starts the letter. This will protect you from anger, a most serious character flaw which causes one to sin. Okay, that's how he starts the letter to his child, and there's not too much else in there. All right, there is more, but it's not a vast amount. But he says something interesting. If you speak quietly, you won't get angry. And this, by the way, is used as a way to deal with people who are angry in your face. Don't try to calm them down. Just talk quietly. If you talk quietly, then it's much less chance that you will lose it. And Rav Shlomo Wolbe, one of the recent great Jewish sages, used to say that people have to work on this. Every day, spend 5-10 minutes just thinking about why you feel like this and working on these character traits. There's more over here you can read through in your own time. I will just finish off the same way I finished off last class. And that was with a concept called Mida Keneged Mida, which measure for measure. And those words are very important. Measure for measure means the way you act towards other people is the way the spiritual world acts towards you. If you have the ability, and you're not expected to be perfect, remember, everyone gets angry. But if you're able to slowly become angry and quick get over it, or give up on your anger at least once a day, when normally you would lose it because someone's cut in front of you, or some unfair thing happened to you, that thing happened to you for a reason. It's an opportunity, says Judaism, to work on your character, because if you're not tested, you don't become great. And here's the punchline, if you don't get angry with others, then the spiritual world does not get angry with you. If you give up your anger with other people, then you will be judged fairly as well. We're going to stop over there. We'll pick this up next week with our next character trait. Have a great and successful week.